I'm going to start this story by telling you a really depressing story. So there's your warning. This doesn't begin well. Okay. Um, the story is that in 2010, there was a man in Arizona named Paul Adams, and he was a Mormon, and he went to the temple and he confessed to his bishop, whose name is John Herod. And I only tell you that because the name is important. Paul Adams confessed to John Herod that he is molesting his 5-year-old daughter. Paul Adams says this to the bishop. He's molesting his daughter. So what does John Herod, the bishop, do? And mind you, in the Mormon temple, bishops are not like Catholic priests. They don't go through seminary. A Mormon bishop can be like your plumber who just gets tapped to be a leader in the temple. So this bishop is like, oh no, that sounds pretty bad. What do I do about this? So he calls Mormon customer service. I'm only slightly exaggerating, but they do have a customer service hotline just for bishops. So he calls the hotline and he's like, you guys, what do I do? Because they just told this guy, Paul Adams, just told me this horrific thing. So what does the customer service line, which by the way, is staffed not by customer service reps, but by the church's lawyers, because like any good HR department, the customer service agency there, they're not interested in helping the people. They're interested in protecting the church. So what does the hotline say? They do not say, hey, you should report that to the cops. You should tell child welfare officers so that they can protect the kids. Nope. They just said, don't tell anybody. Keep it in-house. That's what they told Bishop John Herod. So what did John Herod do? He did end up confiding in one other bishop, and he also brought in Paul Adams and his wife for counseling. And I'm going to share with you this horrible update to what happened. This is, again, a few years ago. An article came out about this. But again, the husband and wife have to go through Mormon counseling, as if, like, maybe if the wife knows he's molesting the daughter, she will put a stop to it. Well, here's what happened. The bishop's counseling sessions apparently had little effect. The man continued to molest his daughter, and later, after her birth in 2015, his infant daughter. She was 6 weeks old. 6 weeks old at that time. He just continued doing it. He made videos of the encounter and posted them on pornographic websites, which were eventually discovered by Interpol, reported to his employer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and led to criminal charges. But let's just recap here. We already knew he was abusing his 5-year-old daughter. The guy confesses. The bishop does nothing. The abuse continues, not just with the 5-year-old girl, but he gives birth to the couple gives birth to another kid, and then he starts molesting her at 6 weeks old. And it just kept happening. That went on for years. So as you saw in that article, like there were criminal charges. The 2 girls who were abused and their 3 other siblings were eventually adopted, albeit by separate families. I don't know what's going on with them. It's not my business. I hope they are okay. The wife was later indicted on 12 criminal counts. Adams, the dude who was doing all this stuff, he was indicted on 11 counts of child sexual abuse. But in 2017, when he was in prison and awaiting trial, he hanged himself. So he's a non-factor now. So that's how that story ended, at least in his case. But just a tragic, awful situation in every single way. So the reason this came up again in 2020 is because 2 of the girls in that family, and I don't know if they were the 2 victims or other 2 or whatever, but 2 of those people decided to file a lawsuit, not against the guy, but against the Mormon Church. The daughters of that dude sued the church, saying, you knew this was happening and you allowed it to continue. So they filed this lawsuit. And look at what their lawyer said, because I think she puts it really well here. Her name is Lynn Cadigan. Cadogan sums up the entire case in the first paragraph of the complaint's introduction. This case involves horrible sexual, physical, and emotional abuse of children between the ages of 6 weeks and 12 years old that went on for 7 years. The biological father of these victims made videos of his rapes, and now these videos are everywhere on the World Wide Web. The perpetrator admitted his abuse and crimes to his Mormon church and received counseling for his crimes. The Mormon leaders, I'm sorry, can you bring that up again, Den? I did not know this detail. Those videos were among those found on Josh Duggar's computer, by the way. Wow. I didn't know Josh Duggar was involved in this story, but there you go. The Mormon church leaders knew about the abuse, and yet no one reported these crimes to the authorities. The Mormon church leaders gave guidance and care to these children for 7 years, sat next to them in church, and allowed these vicious crimes to continue. So they sued. They sued the church saying, you knew it was happening, you allowed it to continue, what the hell? And the reason I bring this up, and I think many of you probably saw this headline somewhere this week, because the headline, I think, alone, a lot of people really upset. This is from the Associated Press. Here's the headline. Court cites clergy penitent privilege in dismissing child sex abuse lawsuit against Mormon Church. And that's a lot of words that I will decipher for you right there. But like, basically, that lawsuit against the Mormon Church was thrown out by a judge. And basically, the reason that they said it was thrown out is because Paul Adams confessed to the molestation in an act of confession. And the rules of confession say anything you say in confession remains a secret. And so what the judge is saying, the bishop was under no obligation to report any of that to the cops, to child welfare officials, nobody. He did not break the law. So you cannot sue him, or you cannot sue the Mormon Church for not reporting it to the police when the law says they don't have to. So the entire case was tossed out. That's what clergy penitent privilege is, and that is infuriating in every single way. One of the things that the lawyer, Lynn Cadogan, said, I don't know where it is. I'm see if I can pull this up really quick. She was obviously frustrated by that turn of events right there. I don't have this in front of me right now. But anyway, one of the things Lynn Cadogan said in response to all this is, how do you explain to young victims that a rapist's religious beliefs are more important than their right to be free of rape? Which is, yeah, fair question. She said she is appealing the ruling, but also if you allow this to stand, it completely eviscerates the state's child protection law in Arizona. Like, how do you protect children when confessions of the crime don't count for anything if they're done inside of a religious center, you know? What did the Mormon Church say after this case was tossed out? Guess what? They're very happy. I'm going to read to you from an article. In a prepared statement, the Mormon Church said, "We are pleased with the Arizona Superior Court's decision, yada, yada, yada. Contrary to some news reports and exaggerated allegations, the court found that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its clergy handled this matter consistent with Arizona law." Which is true. It is consistent with Arizona law, but it is messed up that they're like celebrating a law that is clearly broken. And of course, it's messed up that this law exists at all. Like, leave it to the Mormon Church to do a victory lap after adding more suffering to the lives of sex abuse victims. But like, all of this was probably predictable, because this story has become like exhibit A when it comes to how the Mormon Church covers up this kind of abuse. Like, if there's any way for Mormons to deal with these sorts of problems internally before the outside world hears about it, that is their preference. And time again, they have failed to take care of the problems, and the abuse has thrived. So here's the deal with the law in Arizona that they're so happy about. Arizona does not require religious leaders to report abuse to law enforcement if they learned about it through an act of confession. And that is not true in every case. Like, if you're a public school teacher and you find out a kid is being abused, you have a legal obligation to tell the kid's counselor or some authority at the school so they can report it and do what they need to do. But not pastors, not bishops, not priests. If someone tells them a secret, believing it will remain a secret, the law allows that to remain a secret, even if people are getting hurt. I think in Australia, like a few years ago, there was a Catholic priest, who confessed to another Catholic priest that he had sexually assaulted, raped, like, lots of people. I forget the number. It was too high. One is too high, but this was absolutely too high. And of course, because it was confession, nothing happened. And then that priest kept doing it, and it stayed that way for years. And his victim count just got higher and higher because no one could do anything about it because he only confessed during confession. I want to show you one thing. When there were attempts to change the law in Arizona, of course, Republicans stopped it. This is, let me share this with you here. Here we go. There we go. To force a clergy member to report a confidential communication changes the whole nature of the confessional, said Senator Eddie Farnsworth. This is an Arizona state senator who's a member of the Mormon Church. Earlier this year, he declined to give a hearing to a bill that sought to further narrow the clergy exemption. So this dude is just like, yeah, we can't change confessions. So what if there are some kids who get molested along the way? There was another quote here by the same dude. Where did it go? I know it's a long article here. There we go. Uh, the bill that would have said clergy members still have to report this stuff, well intentioned as it might have been, would disrupt centuries of church dogma, said Farnsworth, who, as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has the authority to decide which bills to consider. Yeah, we wouldn't want to disrupt centuries of religious dogma even when kids are getting molested. Like, what the hell? What? Why? Why? And the reason religious institutions don't want the exemption taken off the books is because they value secrecy over safety. Their religious dogma is more important than a child getting sexually abused. They think confessions are a sacrament, and anything less than complete confidentiality would be an obstacle to their faith. Or to put it simply, they just don't give a shit about kids, victims of abuse, anything like that. That rule about confession turns these religious leaders into moral monsters, and it stops them from helping the people who need it most. One of the things in the Associated Press article this week that I think you need to check out is this passage right here. The Associated Press found that 33 states exempt clergy of any denomination from laws requiring professionals such as teachers, physicians, and psychotherapists from reporting information about child sex abuse to police or child welfare officials if the abuse was divulged during a confession. Although child welfare advocates in some states have backed legislation to eliminate the privilege, lobbying by the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, and the Jehovah's Witnesses has successfully persuaded lawmakers to maintain the exemption. They are lobbying to make sure they're allowed to keep abuse secret. That's how messed up they are. It is a glaring loophole that has been a blessing for abusers everywhere. Because think about what that means for guys like Paul Adams. You can go to confession, you can tell them the most heinous things that you are doing, and still think you are getting right with God. And then you can just continue your predatory ways. I mean, the lawsuit has argued the clergy penitent privilege should not apply to the people involved in these discussions. But the judge said, doesn't matter. Everything we're talking about here involves confession, so the church and its leaders are not responsible for it. Again, it's infuriating. And right now, again, Arizona is a state where Republicans have a very slim majority in the legislature. Maybe if that flips in the next election, maybe that changes. But until then, there are plenty of states that would rather protect priests than protect kids who are victims of abuse. Messed up.